This podcast is a member of the New York City Podcast Network at nycpodcastnetwork.com. Visit us to listen to over 250 amazing podcasts just like this one.
Japanese street style is some of the cutest and trendiest clothing in the world. Introducing Cherry Goddess Women's Clothing and Accessories, the hottest original and cute clothing company. We offer tops, clothes, accessories, shoes, dresses and skirts, and comfortable homeware that we guarantee you will love. Cherry Goddess Women's Clothing, super cute Japanese style clothing.
The Deconstruction Battalion of the NKVD. Later, he was transferred to the regular army. He was severely wounded in 1942. Putin's maternal grandmother was killed by the German occupiers of the Tver region in 1941. And his maternal uncles disappeared on the Eastern Front during World War II. On September 1st, 1960, Putin started his school number 193 at Boskov Lane near his home. He was one of the few in the class of approximately 45 pupils who were not members of the Young Pioneer Organization. At age 12, he began to practice Sambo and Judo. In his free time, he enjoyed reading the works of Karl Marx, Friedrich Engels, and Lenin. Putin studied German at St. Petersburg High School, 281, and speaks German as a second language. Putin studied law at Leningrad State University, named after Andrei Zandanov, now St. Petersburg State University. In 1970, he graduated in 1975. His thesis was on the most favored nation trading principle in international law. While there, he was required to join the Communist Party of the Soviet Union and remained a member until it ceased to exist, when it was outlawed in August 1991. Putin met Anatoly Sobchak, an assistant professor who taught business law, and later became the co-author of the Russian Constitution and the corruption schemes persecuted in France. Putin will be influential in Sobchak's career in St. Petersburg, and Sobchak will be influential in Putin's career in Moscow. In 1975, Putin joined the KGB and trained at the 401st KGB School of Okhotnik, Leningrad. Sorry if I'm pronouncing your city wrong, Russia. August training, he worked in the Second Chief Directorate before he was transferred to the First Chief Directorate, where he monitored foreigners and consular officials in Leningrad. September 1984, Putin was sent to Moscow for furthering training at the Yuri Andronovich Red Banner Institute. From 1985 to 1990, he served in Dresden, East Germany, using cover identity as a translator. The period in his career is mostly unclear. I'm not surprised. He's KGB. They're not going to tell you nothing. Masha Genzin, a Russian-American who was offered a biography about Putin, claims Putin and his colleagues were reduced mainly to collected press clippings, thus contributing to the mountains of useless information produced by the KGB. Putin's work was also downplayed by former Stasi spy chief Marcus Wolf and Putin's former KGB colleague Vladimir Uslysov. According to journalist Catherine Belton, this downplay was actually covered for Putin's involvement, the KGB coordination, and support for the terrorist Red Army faction, whose members were frequently hiding in East Germany with the support of Stasi, and Dresden was preferred as marginal town with a low presence of Western intelligence services. According to the anonymous source, a former RAF member, at these one meetings in Dresden, the militant presidents Putin with a list of weapons that were later delivered to the in West Germany. Klaus Sokol, who claimed to be recruited by Putin, said the latter also handled a neo-Nazi Rainer Sontag and attempted to recruit and offer a study on poisons. Putin also reported met Germans to be recruited for wireless communication affairs together with an interpreter. He was involved in wireless communication technologies in Southeast Asia due to trips of German engineers recruited by him there and to the West. According to Putin's official biography, during the fall of Berlin Wall that began on November 9, 1989, he saved the files of the Soviet Cultural Center and of that KGB villa in Dresden for official authorities of the would-be United Germany to prevent demonstrators, including KGB and Stasi agents, from obtaining and destroying them. He then supposedly burnt all the KGB files in a few hours, but saved the archives of the Soviet Cultural Center for the German authorities. Nothing's told about the selection criteria during this burning. For example, concerning Stasi files or files of the other agencies of the German Democratic Republic or the USSR. He explained that many documents were left to Germany only because the furnace burst, but many documents of the KGB villa were sent to Moscow. After the collapse of the communist East German government, Putin was to resign for active KGB service because of suspicions aroused regarding his loyalty during demonstrations in Dresden and earlier, though the KGB and the Soviet Red Army still operated in Eastern Germany. He returned to Leningrad in early 1990 as a member of active reserves, where he worked about 3 months with the International Affairs section of Leningrad State University, reporting to Rice Vector Union Machadov while working on his doctoral dissertation. There he looked for new KGB recruits, watched the student body, and renewed his friendship with former Professor Anatoly Stavrovik, soon to be mayor of Leningrad. Putin claims that he resigned to the rank of Lieutenant Colonel August 20, 1991, on the second day of the 1991 Soviet coup d'etat attempt against the Soviet President Mikhail Gorbachev. Putin says, as soon as the coup began, I immediately decided which side I was on. Although he knows the choice was hard because he spent of the best part of his life with the organs. In 1999, Putin described communism as a blind ally far away from the mainstream of civilization. Alright, we're going to talk about his political career. Alright. First, we're going to talk about his time 1990 to 1996. St. Petersburg administration. In May 1990, Putin was appointed as an advisor on international affairs to the mayor of Leningrad, Anatoly Sobchak. In 2017 interview with Oliver Stone, Putin said he resigned to the KGB in 1991 following the coup against Mikhail Gorbachev, as he did not agree with what had happened and did not want to be a part of the intelligence in the new administration. According to Putin's statements in 2018 and 2021, he may have worked as a private taxi driver to earn extra money or considered such a job. On June 28, 1991, he became head of the Committee for External Relations of the Mayor's Office, with responsibility for promoting international relations and foreign investments and registering business ventures. Within a year, Putin was investigated by the City Legislative Council by Marina Salev. It was concluded that he understood prices and permitted the exploit of metals valued at $93 million in exchange for foreign food aid that never arrived. Despite the investors' recommendation that Putin be fired, Putin remained the head of the Committee for External Relations until 1996. From 1994 to 1996, he has held several other political and government positions in St. Petersburg. That was sketchy. In March 1994, Putin was appointed as the first deputy chairman of government of St. Petersburg. In May 1995, he organized the St. Petersburg branch of the pro-government Our Home Russia political party, the little party of power founded by Prime Minister Viktor Shomyrin. In 1995, he managed the legislative election campaign for that party, and from 1995 through June 1997, he was the leader of the St. Petersburg branch. 1996 to 1999, early Moscow career. In June 1996, Gorbachev has lost his bid for re-election in St. Petersburg, and Putin, who has headed his election campaign, resigned for the positions in the city administration. He removed to Moscow, was appointed deputy chief of the Presidential Property Management Department, headed by the Pavel Borodin. He occupied this position until March 1997. He was responsible for the foreign property of the state and organized the transfer of former assets of the Soviet Union and the CPSU to the Russian Federation. On March 26, 1997, President Boris Yeltsin appointed Putin direct deputy chief of the presidential staff, where he remained until 1998, the chief of the main control directorate of the Presidential Property Management Department. His predecessor in his position was Alexei Kudrin, and his successor was Nikolai Patrushev, both future prominent politicians and Putin's associates. In June 27, 1997, at the St. Petersburg Mining Institute, guided by rector Vladimir Lichenskio, Putin defended his candidate a science dissertation in economics titled The Strategic Planning of Regional Resources under the Formation of Market Relations. This exemplified the custom in Russia whereby a young rising official wrote a scholarly work in mid-career. When Putin later became president, the dissertation became a target of plagiarism accusations by his fellows at the Brookings Institution after it was discovered that 15 pages was copied from the American textbook. Putin responded with the dissertation was referenced. The Brookings fellows asserted that constituted plagiarism, albeit perhaps unintentional. The dissertation committee repudiated the accusations. On May 25, 1998, Putin was appointed the first deputy chief of the presidential staff of the regions in succession to Victoria Mitlina. On July 15th, he was appointed head of the Commission for the Preparation Agreements on the Limitation of Power of Regions and the head of Federal Center attached to the president, replacing Sergei Shakharhay. After Putin's appointment, the commission completed no such agreements, although during Shakharhay's term as the head of the commission, 46 such agreements have been signed. Later, after becoming president, Putin canceled all 46 agreements. On July 25, 1998, Yeltsin appointed Putin director of Federal Security Service, the primary intelligence and security organization of the Russian Federation and the successor of the KGB. On August 9, 1999, Putin was appointed one of three first deputy prime ministers, and on that day was appointed acting prime minister of the government of the Russian Federation of President Yeltsin. Yeltsin also announced that he wanted to see Putin as his successor. Later on the same day, Putin agreed to run for presidency. On August 16th, the State Duma approved his appointment as Prime Minister with 233 votes in favor, 84 against, 17 abstained, while a simple majority of 226 was required, making him Russia's fifth Prime Minister fewer than 18 months. On his appointment, Fu expected Putin, virtually unknown to the general public, to last any longer than his predecessors. He was initially regarded as a Yeltsin loyalist, like other prime ministers of Boris Yeltsin. Putin did not choose ministers himself. His cabinet was determined by the presidential administration. Yeltsin's main opponents and would-be successor were already campaigning to replacing the ailing president, and he fought hard to prevent Putin's emergence as a potential successor. Following the Russian apartment bombings and the invasion of Dagestan by Mudeens, including the former KGB agents based in the Chelsean Republic of Ikaria, Putin's law and order image and unrelenting approach to the Second Chechen War soon combined his raise to popularity and allow him to overtake his rivals. While not formally associated with any party, Putin pledged his support of the newly formed Unity Party, which won the second largest percentage of the popular vote in December 1999 Duma elections, and in turn supporting Putin. On December 31st, 1999, Yeltsin unexpectedly resigned, and according to the Constitution of Russia, Putin became acting president of the Russian Federation. On assuming his role, Putin went to a previously scheduled visit to Russian troops in Chechnya. The first presidential decree that Putin signed on December 31st, 1999 was titled on guarantees of the former president of a Russian federation and members of his family. This ensured that the corruption charges against the ongoing president and his relatives would not be pursued. This was most notably targeted at the Multilex bribery case in which Yeltsin family members were involved. On August 30, 2000, a criminal investigation in which Putin himself, as a member of the St. Petersburg city government, was one of the subjects, was dropped. On December 30th, 2000, yet another case against the prosecutor general was dropped for lack of evidence, despite thousands of documents having been forwarded by Swiss prosecutors. On February 12, 2001, Putin signed a similar federal law which replaced the decree in 1999, a case regarding Putin's alleged corrupting in metal exports from 1992 and brought back by Marina Salai. But she was silenced and forced to leave St. Petersburg. While his opponents has been preparing for an election in June 2000, Yeltsin's resignation resulted in presidential elections being held by March 26, 2000. Putin won in the first round with 53% of the vote. 2000 to 2004, first presidential term. The inauguration of President Putin occurred May 7, 2000. Putin appointed the Minister of Finance, Mikhail Gorbachev, as Prime Minister. The first major challenge to Putin's popularity came in August 2000, when he was criticized for alleged mishandling of the Kerch submarine disaster. That criticism was largely because it took several days for Putin to return from vacation and several more before he visited the scene. In 2000 to 2004, Putin set about the reconstruction of the impoverished condition of the country, apparently winning a power structure with Russian oligarchs, reaching a grand bargain with them. This bargain allowed the oligarchs to remain most of their powers in exchange for the exploit, support, and alignment of Putin's government. The Moscow Theater hostage crisis occurred in October 2002, many in the Russian press and the international media warned that the deaths of 130 hostages in the Special Forces rescue operation during the crisis would severely damage President Putin's popularity. Shortly after the siege has ended, President Putin enjoyed record public approval ratings. 83% of the Russians declared themselves satisfied with Putin and his handling of the siege. 2003, a referendum was held in Chechnya, adopting a new constitution which declares the Republic of Chechnya as part of Russia. On the other hand, the region did not acquire autonomy. Chechnya has been gradually stabilized with the establishment of the parliamentary elections than a regional government. Throughout the Second Chechnyan War, Russia severely disabled the Chechen rebel movement. However, sporadic attacks by rebels continued to occur during the Northern Caucasus. 2004 to 2008 is President Putin's second term. March 14, 2004, Putin was elected to the presidency for a second term, receiving 71% of the vote. The Bessian school hostage crisis took place on 1 to 3 September 2004. More than 330 people died, including 186 children. The near 10-year period prior to the rise of Putin after the dissolution of Soviet rule was a time of upheaval in Russia. In 2005 Kremlin speech, Putin characterized the collapse of the Soviet Union as the greatest geopolitical catastrophe of the 20th century. Putin elaborated, moreover, the epidemic of disintegration infected Russia itself. The country's cradle-to-grave social safety net was gone and the life expectancy declined in the period preceding Putin's rule. In 2005, the national priority projects were launched to improve Russia's healthcare, education, housing, and agriculture. The continued criminal possession of the wealthiest man in Russia, president of Yukal's oil gas company, Mikhail Khodorkovsky, for fraud and tax evasion, was seen by the international press as retaliation for Khodorkovsky donations to both liberal and communist opponents of the Kremlin. Khodorkovsky was arrested, Yukos was bankrupt, and the company's assets was auctioned at below market value, with the largest share acquired by the state company Rosneft. The fate of Yukos was seen as a sign of broader shift of Russia towards a system of state capitalism. This was underscored in July 2014 when the shareholders of Yukos was awarded $50 billion in compensation by the Permanent Arbitration Court of The Hague. On October 7th, Anna Polonsky, a journalist who exposed corruption in the Russian army and his conduct in Chechnya, was shot in the lobby of her apartment building on Putin's birthday. The death of Polonsky triggered international criticism with accusations that Putin has failed to protect the country's new independent media. Putin said that her death caused the government more problems than her writings. In 2007, dissenters' marches was organized by the opposition group The Other Russia, led by former chess champion Garry Kasparov and National Bolshevik leader Edward Limonov. Upon prior warnings, demonstrations in several Russian cities was met by police action, which included interfering of the travel of protesters and the arrest of many as 150 people who attempt to break police lines. December 12, 2007, Putin discovered the government upon request of the Prime Minister Mikhail Vladimir. Vladimir's comment was to give the president a free hand in the run-up parliamentary election. Viktor Zhubachev was appointed to the new prime minister. In 2007, a united Russia won 64.24% of the popular vote for St. Duma according to election preliminary results. United Russia's victory in 2007 elections was seen as many as an indignation of strong popular support of the Russian leaderships and its policies. Putin was barred from the third consecutive term by the Constitution. First Deputy Prime Minister Dmitry Medvedev was elected as his successor in a power-switching operation on May 8, 2008. Only a day after handing the presidency to Medvedev, Putin was appointed Prime Minister of Russia, maintaining his political dominance. Putin has said that overcoming the consequences of the world economic crisis was one of the two main achievements of his second premiership. The other was stabilizing the size of Russia's population between 2008 and 2011, following a long period of demographic collapse that began in the 1990s. After United Russia's Congress in Moscow, September 2011, Medvedev officially proposed that Putin stand for presidency in 2012, an offer Putin accepted, giving United Russia's near dominance of Russian politics. Many observers believe that Putin was assured of a third term. This move was expected to see Medvedev stand on United Russia's ticket in the parliamentary elections in December, with goal of becoming prime minister at the end of his presidential term. After the parliamentary elections on December 4th in 2011, tens of thousands of Russians engaged in protests against alleged electoral fraud, the largest protests in Putin's time. Protesters criticized Putin and relied on Russia's and demandment of annulment of election results. These protests sparked a feel of color revolution in society. Putin allegedly organized a number of paramilitary groups loyal to himself and the United Party in the period of 2005-2012. 2012 to 2018, third presidential term. September 24th, 2011, while speaking in the United Party Congress, Medvedev announced that he would recommend the party nominate Putin as his presidential candidate. He also revealed that the two men had long ago cut a deal to allow Putin to run for president in 2012. This switch was termed by many in the media as the Russian term for the chess move castling. On March 4, 2012, Putin won the 2012 presidential election in the first round with 63.6% of the vote. Despite widespread accusations of vote rigging, opposition groups accused Putin and United Russia's party of fraud. While efforts to maintain the election's transparency were publicized, including the usage of webcams and polling stations, the vote was criticized by Russian opposition and the internal observers for the Organization of Security and Cooperation in Europe for procedural irregularities. Anti-Putin protests took place during and directly after the presidential campaign. The most notorious protest was the Pussy Riot, formed on February 24th and subsequent trial. An estimated 8,000 to 20,000 protesters gathered in Moscow on May 6, when 80 people were injured in the confrontations with police and 450 were arrested, with another 120 arrests taking place the following day. The counter-protests of Putin's supporters occurred, which culminated in the gathering of an estimated of 130,000 supporters at Luchesny Stadium, Russia's largest stadium. Some of the attendees stated that they had been paid to come, were forced there by their employers, or misled into believing that they was going to attend a forced festival instead. The rally is considered to be the largest in supporting the Putin to date. Putin's presidency was inaugurated in the Kremlin on May 7, 2012. On his first day, President Putin issued 14 presidential decrees, which are sometimes called the May decrees by the media, including a lefty one saying that will outrage goals for the Russian economy. Other decrees concern education, housing, skilled labor training, relations with European Union, the Defense Ministry, inter-ethnic relations, and other policy areas dealt with in the Putin's program's articles issued during the presidential campaign. Excuse me, I lost my place. In 2012 and 2013, Putin and the United Russian parties backed stricter legislation against the LGBT community in St. Petersburg, Ekaterinburg, and Novosibirsk, a law called the Russian Gay Propaganda Law. This is against homosexual propaganda, which prohibits such symbols as the regular flag, as well as public works containing homosexual content, was adopted by the State Duma in 2013, responding to the international concerns of Russia's legislations. Putin asked critics to note that the law was a ban on propaganda on pedophilia and homosexuality, and he stated that the homosexual visitors to the 2014 Winter Olympics should leave the children in peace. But they denied that there was any professional career or social discrimination as against homosexuals in Russia. They're banning members of the LGBTQ community in Russia. Okay, I didn't know that. In June 2013, Putin attended a televised rally of All Russia People's Front, where he was elected the head of government, which was set up in 2011. According to journalist Steve Rosenberg, the movement is intended to reconnect the Kremlin to the Russian people, and one day, if necessary, replace the increasingly popular United Russia's party that currently backs Putin. Russia-Ukrainian War. 2014, Russia made several military incursions into the Ukrainian territory. After Euromaidan protests in the fall of the Ukrainian President Viktor Yanukovych, Russian soldiers without insignias took control of strategic positions and the infrastructure within the Ukrainian territory of Crimea. Russia then annexed Crimea and Sevastopol after a referendum in which, according to official results, Crimeans voted to join the Russian Federation. Subsequently, demonstration against Ukraine routed legislative actions by pro-Russian groups in the Donbas area of Ukraine escalated into armed conflict between the Ukrainian government and the Russia-backed separatist forces of the self-declared Donetsk Luhansk People Republics. In 2014, Russian military vehicles crossed the border in several locations of Donetsk Oblast. The incursion by the Russian army was seen by Ukrainian authorities as responsible for the defeat of Ukrainian forces in early September. In November 2014, the Ukrainian military reported extensive movement of troops and equipment for Russia into separatist-controlled parts of eastern Ukraine. The Associated Press reported 80 unmarked military vehicles on the move in rebel-controlled areas. An OSCE Special Monitoring Mission observed convoys of heavy weapons and tanks in DPR-controlled territory without insignia. OSCE monitors further stated that they observed vehicles transporting ammunition and soldiers' dead bodies crossing the Russia-Ukrainian border under the guise of humanitarian aid convoys. In early August 2015, the OSCE observed over 21 such vehicles marked with the Russian military code for soldiers killed in action. According to Moscow Times, Russia was trying to intimidate and silence human rights workers discussing Russia's soldiers' indefinite conflict. The OSCE reportedly reported that its observers was denied access to the areas controlled by combined Russian separatist forces. The majority of members of the international community and organizations such as Amnesty International condemned Russia for its action in post-revolutionary Ukraine, accusing it of breaking international law and violating Ukrainian sovereignty. Many countries implemented economic sanctions against Russia, Russian individuals or companies, to which Russia responded in kind. In 2015, the Washington Post reported that Russia has redeployed some of its elite units from Ukraine to Syria in recent weeks to support Syrian President Bashar al-Assad. In December 2015, Putin admitted that Russian military intelligence officers were operating in Ukraine. According to academic Andrei Tesnazgov, many members of the international community assumed that Putin's annexation in Crimea had initiated a completely new kind of Russian foreign policy. They took the annexation of Crimea to mean that the foreign policy has shifted from state-driven to foreign policy, to take an offensive stance to recreate the Soviet Union. He says that this policy shift can be understood as Putin trying to defend nations in Russia's sphere and influence from encroaching Western power. While the act to annex the Crimea is bold and drastic, his new foreign policy may have more similarities to the old policies. This is interesting, guys. This is very interesting. I'm going to talk about the intervention in Russia. I'm also going to talk about the alleged influence that Russia had on the 2016 election, even though I think it's completely untrue. We're going to still talk about it. On September 30, 2015, President Putin authorized Russian military interventions in the Syrian civil war, following a formal request by the Syrian government of military help against rebel and jihadist groups. The Russian military activities consisted of airstrikes, cruise missile strikes, and the use of frontline advertisers and Russian special forces against military groups opposed by the Syrian government, including the Syrian opposition, as well as the Islamic State of Iraq and the Libyan, the Al-Nusra's Front, Al-Assam, and Army of Conquest. The Putin's announcement on March 14, 2016, that he had a mission to set in the Russian military in Syria has been largely accomplished in order to withdraw of the main part of the Russian forces for Syria. Russian forces deployed in Syria continue to actively operate in support of the Syrian government. Russian influence in the 2006 U.S. allegedly. In January 2017, a U.S. intelligence community expressed high confidence that Putin personally ordered an influence campaign, initially to denigrate Hillary Clinton and to harm her electoral chances of potential presidency, then later developing a clear presence for Donald Trump. Trump consistently denied any Russian interference for the U.S. election, as did Putin in December 2016. March 2017, June 2017. Putin stated that it was theoretically possible and could have been perpetuated by the patriot-minded Russian hackers. Another occasion that not even Russians but Ukrainians, Tatars, and Jews, but with the Russian citizen might have been responsible. In July 2018, the New York Times reported that the CIA had long nurtured a Russian source who eventually rose to a position close to Putin, allowing the source to pass key information in 2016 about Putin's direct involvement. Putin continued similar attempts in the 2020 U.S. presidential election, allegedly. All right. I'm going to talk about his fourth and final term. And when I talk about his fourth and final term, you're going to find out why Vladimir Putin is not really a man to be played with. And you're going to understand why all of the world leaders is very uncomfortable with what goes on in the Ukraine. And after I talk about the fourth presidential term, I'm going to list the resources that Ukraine has, and you're going to find out exactly why Russia is so interested in having Ukraine. 2018, the president, which is the fourth presidential term. Putin won the 2018 Russian president election with more than 76% of the vote. The fourth term began on May 7, 2018, and it will last to 2024. On the same day, Putin invited Dmitry Medvedev to form a new government. And on May 18, Putin took part in the opening of a movement along the highway section of the Crimean Bridge. In May 18, Putin signed decrees that the composition of the new government. On May 25, 2018, Putin announced that he would not run for president in 2024, justifying his compliance with the Russian Constitution. On June 14, 2018, Putin opened the 21st FIFA Cup, which took place in Russia for the first time. September 2019, Putin's administration interfered with the results of Russia's nationwide regional elections and manipulated by eliminating all candidates in the opposition. That's allegedly, again, I'm not sure. The event was aimed at contributing the ruling party. United Russia's victory also contributed to the inclined mass protests for democracy, leading to large-scale arrests and cases of police brutality. This is a lot. January 15, 2020, Medvedev and his entire government resigned after Putin's 2020 presidential address to the Federal Assembly. Putin suggested major constitutional amendments that could extend his political power after presidency. At the same time, on behalf of Putin, he continued to exercise his own powers until a new formation of government. Putin suggested that Medvedev take the new created post of deputy chairman of the Security Council. On the same day, Putin nominated Mikhail Mishustin as head of the country's federal tax service for the post prime minister. The next day, he was confirmed by the State Duma in the post and appointed prime minister by Putin's decree. This is the first time that a prime minister was confirmed without any votes against. January 21st, 2020, Mishustin presented the drafting structure of his cabinet. On the same date, the president signed a decree on the structure of the cabinet and appointed the proposed ministers. All right, and this is me talking about Vladimir Putin's political history and early life. Starting to figure out that allegedly, and I'm saying allegedly because I'm not sure, I'm not a lawyer, I don't really know too much about geopolitical politics, but allegedly Russia has a lot of corruption, and Putin is a part of that corruption. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to talk about Ukraine and why Russia is so interested in Ukraine. I'll be back in just a second. Hello, this is Black Wall Street Chronicles, and I'm back. Thank you for waiting for a second. Now, we're going to talk about the major natural resources in Ukraine. This comes from an article called World Atlas, and it asks, what are the major natural resources of Ukraine? Ukraine is the largest country entirely in Europe, and with the 46th largest and the world's 46th largest, with a total area of 233,062 square miles, including Crimea, which is currently claimed by Russia. The Russian population of Ukraine is approximately 42 million people, making it the 32nd most populous country in the world. Its largest capital city is Kiev, located in the non-central part of the country, the north-central part of the country. Ukraine's landscape is characterized by fertile plains and plateaus and is crossed by several rivers that flow into the Black Sea. The country was a key economy in the former Soviet Union. It was classified by the World Bank as a middle-income country. Ukraine has rich reserves of natural resources, which was considered to be the key to its economic growth. However, the corruption and mismanagement of resources have slowed the exploration of some of these natural resources. The first resource is coal. Coal is the main fossil fuel raw material whose reserve can meet the demand for energy in the industry in Ukraine for the next 500 years. It is the largest hydrocarbon fossil resource of Ukraine, accounting for the 95% of the fossil resource. Ukraine has the 7th largest and Europe's 2nd largest coal reserve, and about 34 billion tons. Other sources have estimated their reserves to be approximately 150 billion tons. The country's major coal reserves is located in Donbas Basin and Lviv Basin. The two deposits hold 95% of the coal reserves in Ukraine, with Donbas holding 90.4% and Lviv 2.5%. Over 30% of the reserves in the two basins are cooking coal, producing about 100 million tons of coal annually. These reserves are expected to last about 570 years. Some coal deposits are so found in this basin that the majority of coal produced in Ukraine is for domestic use, especially for electricity production. Coal amounts to about 44% of the fuel for energy generating companies, making it the 2nd most important fuel after nuclear. Let's talk about oil and natural gas. Ukraine is estimated to hold over 1.1 trillion cubic meters of natural gas reserves in 2004, making it 26 amongst the countries with proven gas reserves before Crimea is next. It is also to hold over 135 million tons of oil, Jesus, and 3.7 billion tons of shale oil reserves, Jesus. The country also has reserves of gas condensate of 80,000 tons. My God. 7 oil gas reserves have been exploited years and some are almost exhausted. Gas along with oil fields are mainly located in the 3 provinces of Ukraine. The major field is in Vladimir, was discovered in the 1950s. Ukraine, Australia, and Russia has the biggest proportion of iron ore deposits in the world. Each of the three countries has 10% of the world iron ore reserves. Ukraine alone has estimated 25 billion tons of iron ore reserves and 6% in global iron ore production. That is impressive. There are about 88 deposits across the country. The rich iron ore deposits are mainly located in Kreshmyk, Church, Martopol, Berzhevsky, Kiliviv, Reeve. Out of 88 deposits, 60 billion tons of Berzhevsky hold 2.5 billion tons. A large portion of iron ore deposit has been extracted by surface mining. Ukraine mainly exports its iron ore to China. Ukraine is the top 10 producers of manganese ore. The world has the largest manganese ore reserve in Europe. 2010, the country produced over 736,000 metric tons of marketable manganese oils and concentrates, of which 121,000 metric tons was exploited and the rest was used domestically to purchase fumaroles. The major reserves are located in the southern part of Ukraine. The Nikopol Basin holds about a third in exploited reserves in the country, while the Veliko-Chemysko field holds 66% of the exploited reserves. And finally, we're going to talk about the titanium reserves, and we're going to talk about the titanium reserves, and we're going to talk about the uranium reserves. Ukraine holds the largest titanium reserve in Europe. There are 15 known deposits in different parts of the country, which 4 are being explored. These deposits are situated in Kharkiv, Kiev, Donetsk, and Dnipropetrovsk regions. The country has also the largest uranium deposit in Europe and accounts for 1.8% of the world's uranium deposit. The unproven reserves contain estimated 45,600 tons of uranium. Ukraine has 30 deposits of graphite, containing more than 1 billion tons of 20% of the world's graphite. Only China has more graphite reserves. Other major resources include mercury, gold, potassium salt, gold, building material, ornamental stones, and hydropower resources. And that's why President Vladimir Putin wants Ukraine, y'all. Look at all of the resources that Ukraine has. Yeah, so this is Black Wall Street Chronicles. Thank you for listening to my podcast, and I'm signing off.